From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. We have a quick intro/disclaimer at the top of today's very special episode. First things first, this does contain cursing. If you listen to our show and you do, for one reason or another, have a problem with explicit language, then this might not be your bag of badgers.
Yeah, but when you have, creative genius Dan Harmon of Rick and Morty and Community fame in your presence, you don't tell the guy to self-censor. And it got to the point where it wasn't like we wanted to go through and excise out everything. It's a very frank discussion, a very fun discussion. I think you guys will really enjoy if you want to take that ride with us.
I couldn't be more excited for you to hear me say the S word on this episode.
Stupid?
Yes. No, I'm just joking. I didn't mean to. I assure you, we were just all having a really interesting discussion and things just came out. So venture forth, listen, and enjoy. Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, in spirit with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. However, we have a very special super producer today, and that is our good pal, our third musketeer, ride or die, Mr. Noel Brown.
I didn't really do anything. I just set up the mics and, hit record and made the Pro Tools session and made sure everything was... Okay, I'll take it.
Well, maybe some people don't realize this. The first... year of our show almost was Noel Brown as our producer?
I didn't even have a voice until you gave me like a corner at the end of the episode. Yeah. And then, Matt, you had a child, you and your lovely wife, and were away for a while, and Ben invited me to kind of sit in for you, and then you never fired me. You didn't even ask permission.
Well, you did us a tremendous solid, so thank you, and now you're a part of the team, my friend.
Lo, these many years later. Yeah.
And most importantly, you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. This is a very profound, strange episode for us. We are people who tend to sit in a very bunker-esque recording studio, but now we are not in our typical cavernous headquarters. We are recording in our LA studio.
It's more of a penthouse-esque studio here.
Yeah,
a bit lofty.
I mean, there's a window. I am shriven. I am beside myself.
Yeah, you can almost see Amoeba Records from here.
Well, you can see the Broadway Hollywood, and if you look just a little further out of our field of vision, you can see the Scientology building, one of many here in Los Angeles.
They just want us to know. But today we are not diving into our exploration on our treble lonesome. We are joined by a very special guest whom some of our fellow listeners may recognize. Let's see, where should we start? We did a show together. We are joined today with the mastermind behind Community, the mastermind behind Rick and Morty, the creator and host of Harmontown, the podcast. Yeah, that's right. You heard it correctly. We are joined with Mr. Dan Harmon. Dan, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's surreal.
It is
for sure.
I mean, imagine the surreality from my perspective to hear Ben say those words and also to see his face exhibit no tension when he got derailed between, he just waited there for.
He's a good guy.
And you are you.
Yeah.
He was kind of like, oh man.
We're all about ritualization here. I don't want you to know. We got to stick to it.
Well, ritualization, is important. This is we want everybody listening to know that we're approaching not just one central topic today. We may find some other stuff along the way. We might find one big thing, one big truth or dilemma or conspiracy or belief. But you may hear a lot of references in the course of today's episode to our previous show, because we just did it last night in Harmontown, and I believe that we're all on the same page. When we wrapped the show, we ended up hanging out for like an hour to continue talking about the stuff. Domestication of dogs came up.
The world's biggest conspiracy.
Right. And
just to put this out there, if you are listening to this show and you do not listen to Harmontown or Harmon Quest or some of these other shows, like, do yourself a favor and put them into your phone or whatever device while you're hanging out with us doing this.
Just jack them straight into your brain in any way that you possibly can.
We're on the way to that sort of
thing. And I don't know what the publishing schedule's like, but I think the Harmontown episode should be live by now.
Thursday, right?
I think it'll be live and free on Thursday. And if you're one of the Kool-Aid drinkers that helps support us with subscription, it was live that night, and they can download it anytime.
I just don't remember if we have episodes in the can, if this episode's coming out before. I think that this episode will already be out in the wild. So you can go check it out immediately, hit pause, and then come back. Because part of this is going to be kind of almost a continuation of that in a lot of ways.
So I guess part of the story we want to provide the background on, we found out that we collectively enjoy applying critical thinking to concepts that are often treated as, for lack of a better word, a third rail of sorts, things that cannot be discussed or cannot be explored. And when we learned that we were all that we were interested in this kind of thought process, it's fair to say that the three of us freaked out a little bit. It
was a minor.
I did. And then we said, well, let's pick the brain. Let's pick Dan Harmon's brain about some of the things that are commonly called conspiracy theories, or maybe even fringe beliefs, and let's see whether there are any that stand out to you as particularly, for one reason or another, compelling, because sometimes we say that we can't let go of a story, but sometimes a story won't let go of us, that kind of thing. And in some earlier interviews that you have conducted, you've noted things like JFK, right, which we talked about previously in a little bit, and we didn't really get a definitive answer.
We didn't solve the case?
No.
Oh, man.
I was actually surprised to find out that despite the differences between the three of you on that topic, that actually all three of you agree that there was some extracurricular shenanigans going on, for sure.
Yeah.
Which would have been an easy thing to assume about everybody in like I don't know, a while ago, but I said like this new generation, I sort of, because I've come around in my old age to being like, I think Oswald acted alone.
Oh, yeah?
Really?
Which may or may not be blasphemy to your listeners, but because it's just like such a sellout concept.
No, not necessarily at all.
I like the term extracurricular shenanigans because one of the things that's odd, regardless of how the actual assassination occurred, is the death of Oswald. Right? That itself is, of course, not a smoking gun. Poor choice of words there, but it is. It is strange that at that time, probably one of the most heavily surveilled and protected individuals in the country, right, is assassinated close range with a gun. We're just sort of pitching ideas, right? Brainwashing, is it possible? Could we somehow influence someone's brain to do a set of actions that they would not normally do? I mean, we know we can alter people's belief with some pretty advertising, right? We can very easily change some behaviors, but do you believe that brainwashing of some sort would be possible?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, because we have enough documented case study just from going through the 70s of, before we had the internet and, but after we had television, what we saw was a lot of like fear, obviously a lot of panic about it that exaggerated it, but we did see evidence in public life of these big stories of like, people being able to have a massive amount of influence over the thought process of people. I mean, I don't think can you take an individual, tie them to a chair, and over their absolute protests flip them from one kind of human being to another, that might be a different question. But we all know you can definitely change a person's value system. You can change a person. You can turn Patty Hearst from an heiress into a bank robber. We know that. You can do that probably simply through denying her a certain amount of food and water and saying a certain amount of things. I mean, that's an easy baseline.
Well, no, that's the thing about brainwashing. I mean, the brainwasher has to have complete control over the target, and that includes everything from like sleep patterns to when you eat, when you don't eat, like how you conduct your day-to-day life, and it becomes this pattern. And then you absolutely can, train somebody, for lack of a better word, to be a certain way.
But you guys have asked the questions, can you erase memories, for instance? So I think that's the thing is like, so Patty Hearst is an example. Like I doubt she forgot that she was an heiress. That might have been fuel for the fire for her. They were probably telling her, no, you can't take a shower. You can't pee in this bucket. You can't until you understand that the underclasses are being exploited by the UBDUs. And that what she was able to do was transform her like consciousness and go like, yeah, you know what? You guys are kind of giving me a squarer deal than my rich family. But did she forget who she was? No. I don't mean to say no. I don't know. But I'm saying like we don't. That's a different thing. It's the Manchurian Candidate thing. That's the big question. Can you take a patriot from behind enemy lines, put them in a windowless room, and subject them to experiences that will make them go back to America, make love to their wife, and the whole time like secretly and triggered by some phrase like remember that they just want to kill Gandhi and like not know why.
Like Sirhan,
right.
but without being necessarily a member of a military service, right? And the polka dot dress.
Okay, so what if you could do that over time and you can program, let's say, an entire population through the television content that exists or the news that comes out or the prevailing feelings within a society to get, to see what we see these days, which the mass shooters that exist everywhere. Do you think there's anything, do you guys think it's possible at all that our society has almost programmed a group or a generation of certain people who feel a certain way to act on some of those feelings? Does this sound too? Is this a third rail?
No. I mean, like when you say that, it makes me think of just like the way Fox News and Donald Trump are this like weird echo chamber kind of. They're like sort of regurgitating this information back and forth, and it's serving an agenda. And certain people that feel a certain way can be triggered by it and triggered to act because it is kind of hateful and kind of insidious, and it ultimately is this dog whistle way of telling people to like do a thing.
Well, to feel a certain way. And I guess what I'm saying is there are areas on the internet where you can go to and have all of those things then repeated back to you again and again and again. And I'm genuinely a little nervous about that, the way we've kind of spliced off all of these different negative, very, very negatively focused thoughts. I don't know.
It's definitely created an environment where, politics aside, we've teed up individual humans for lack of a better word, radicalization.
Yeah.
And if that word makes people cringe because they're tired of hearing it directed against their political end of the spectrum, I stress that I really am just using the word to mean, regardless of what your beliefs are, the amplification of them and the nudging in a sociopathic direction about them that results in what we would have called in our youth like a typical teenage phase, for instance, where we were nihilistic, suicidal, we were misogynistic, probably. If maybe I should speak for myself, but you go through these phases where you're like, it's everyone's fault but mine that I'm feeling like not part of this world. And I was not plugged into a machine at that time that had this much power to amplify what I was thinking, reward me for what I was thinking, and most importantly of all, about the radicalization word is giving a 35-year-old man access to me at that phase, where it's like a guy that would be rousted for spending that much one-on-one time with a 15-year-old in a park or a zoo or even at a neighborhood party, but on the internet is a guy who's like, hey, I love selling this propaganda like in my gift shop, and I also have my own political agenda. And this is kind of a thing we see across the political spectrum is older dudes like capitalizing on the fact that teenagers, they're in a fugue state. Their neural maps are like developing, and you can do some real interesting sculpting with a young brain. If you, I have benefited from that. You know, like I make television shows that make young people feel better, hopefully.
And 36-year-olds.
But but I've been doing it long enough that I have 25-year-olds that come to me and say, when I was 15, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I had these terrible things happen to me, and et cetera, et cetera. And your show was there, and I leaned on it, and I just think to myself, you know, how fortunate for them and me that I'm as benign as a low wall that they could just lean on. But how many of us remember being at those weak stages of our life and like encountering less than benevolent forces? You got to take pity on the youngest generation now, because it's like we've reached a society where there's no guppy tank anymore.
Well, here's a question. Like, so this Joker movie that everyone either like is indifferent to, thinks is dangerous and insidious, or they think it's some kind of like mirror of our society. Like Michael Moore made a big to-do about how he thought it was dangerous not to see it, because it's literally the guy you're talking about, or like the way media can like infect somebody and cause them to kind of feel like they're alone and society's against them, and then to act out in these ways, right? So he says he thinks this is a really important vision of that, and it's like a cautionary tale. But then there are people that say this is a movie that will do the very thing that he's saying it's trying to commentary on, and like incite those 15-year-olds that are maybe at that transitional period where they could take it in a positive direction or take it in a scary direction, and like push them to do that. I just think it's a really interesting question. You know, like media, is there a responsibility like in creating media to like be benevolent?
I would be in the firm column of God. I mean, if that's the direction we have to go, then what are we doing as a society?
Yeah.
And I'm biased about that because I make my money saying whatever I want. I just happen to have benign goals, but I really do. I just feel so. Everything starts to feel so futile once you go across the threshold of, well, everybody whose voice is able to reach more than 1,000 people has a responsibility over their ears and their brains. Like, it's just sort of like, that's true ethically, but when it becomes true in a real way, it just seems like we're gone as a species. At the same time, it's like so important to recognize that all the internet is doing is like, it's like an early stage telepathy box that is only exchanging the most base thoughts. And what we're finding out about our species is that we're not that into reading. We're not that into research. We're not that into remapping our brains. We actually have, at this stage, we're finding out about ourselves that whether whoever's fault it may be, if you give us a box that can like, you know, give us other thoughts, like we kind of are going to tend to keep hitting the button that says, make me feel good about who I am first. Mm-hmm. I want to be a better person, but this button says I'm already a good person. That makes me feel like a better person.
Yeah, it's a dopamine box.
Yeah, I mean that's calculated, and it's also it's a question of technological innovation, right? In one column, opposing our very slow, but I would argue slightly speeding up pace of evolution or natural selection. We have these brains that are designed to do very basic things, and they all go back to these very basic drives. And it sounds cliche to say it, but our only real value to our species, as far as our species with everything else taken out of it, our only real value as individuals is to make more of us. And it's terrible to say it that way, because it is so true across any large-scale human example, which I know sounds a bit hyperbolic, but it's not inborn in this species to preserve other species. It's not inborn to preserve individuals. That's for sure. Yeah. And now we see that we have a greater amount of tools, and we also have this. We also have, in general, this plummeting boundary of privacy. I think without putting any of us on the spot, we here in this room, and many of us listening, are old enough to look at a world in which people grew up with YouTube. And you could start a YouTube channel. You're 8 years old, and you have no idea how you're going to feel about that when you're 62. And that's because we have this evolving concept of privacy, and privacy as we understand it now is very short-lived, right? We think of Victorian era, or we think of pilgrims and how they seemed high-minded and moral, but entire families lived in one room and they heard their parents banging each other on a regular basis, right? Which is it's true, and it's scandalous. It's scandalous to, that's something you would call child services on in some parts of the world today, but the normal has changed. And I know I'm rambling a little. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. But the point here is that we are fundamentally ill-equipped at this juncture to work with the things that we have created. Philo Farnsworth invents the television when he's 14 years old, and he's plowing. He's got not the best life, and he's plowing stuff across this field, and he goes, what if we could send an image just line by line, the way I'm plowing this field, because God knows farming sucks. I want to do something else. And then we created this thing we're not ready for.
Yeah.
The example we always use here is the scene in Fantasia, where the sorcerer's apprentice, Mickey, he's I found a new way to mop.
Yeah.
And he gets overwhelmed. So are we reaching a point where our evolution as an organic species, as meatbags, speeds up to match the exponential curve of technological innovation?
Well, I've always wondered the same thing.
Yeah.
And we talked about that last night, the idea of you breed dogs to look a certain way, but then certain behaviors kind of transmit through the genes or whatever, the idea of epigenetics. And I feel like that's got to be happening with humans, with all of the technology that we have in various generations, the skills that we maybe lose as a result of leaning on this technology so hard. Does our next generation lose that too? On a short, on a long enough timeline, or maybe it is accelerated.
But there are certain, and there is. My friend Ryan Krause, who has his podcast, will plug it. Cold Case Murder Mysteries. I call him Asperger Detective on our show. That's how we met him. I use the term admiringly. He's very relentless in his position on that show. No matter what murder he's discussing, it kind of always comes around to how we're all going to be AI, and he looks at everything through that lens. And his view of sociopaths is basically at risk of ruining his not paraphrasing him accurately, is that sociopaths are basically debugging tools. They will always be around. We will never weed them out because the larger human experiment biologically profits in the larger sense. No matter how much we suffer for the existence of sociopaths, we all benefit largely from their existence, because who else is going to be stupid / smart enough
confident enough.
Take a fire axe to their family for the insurance money, try to rob this bank, to take these hostages, to drive their car over the speed limit, like it whatever the bounds that we create so that we can have a social contract. A sociopath comes around and either out of sheer stupidity and selfishness, because they're not exclusively smart people. They're just, the only difference between them and us is they just don't have that, like they're just off the grid emotionally, or like, and they tend to do these things that are like, hey, I'm Lizzie Borden. I think I'll kill my family, and that way I'll have a better life as a person. And like there's different lenses, or you can look at that person as a hero or a villain. It really doesn't matter. But the objective truth is, this is a person who didn't agree with our rules, that it was a huge risk and not worth it at all to grab an axe and like take it to your family. And what happens is these people, either they get away with it, which means the system was flawed, and then the system changes. So sometimes sociopaths are, hey, they're tomorrow's activists. They change the rules and whatever. But typically it's more like you expend a bunch of law enforcement energy trying to like make sure that the system works no matter how disgusting people get. And that from an evolutionary perspective, we keep generating this variety of human brain, and it's not going to evolve away from horrendous, monstrous thoughts. It's not going to evolve away from the 1 in 100 chance that your kid has a screw loose. And 1 in 100 in a village, or in Nebraska, in Philo Farnsworth time, 1 in 100 means you're always outnumbered 100-1 with your weird, crazy Jeffrey Dahmer thoughts that are locked away in your head. And that takes a weird fucking turn the day the internet happens, because 1 in 100 becomes 1 million people, like possibly all together in the same room.
Yeah.
If everyone's on Twitter, if 100 million people are on Twitter, 1 million sociopaths are on Twitter. That depending on how you look at what the plan was for our species, if there was a plan, that is either our undoing, or it's the game on. It's like, okay,
it's the
here we
bottleneck.
go.
Yeah.
Like this is what we've been leading toward. And it all comes down to what you believe almost religiously, in that sense of like, do you believe that like our species is kind of like, do you believe in that selfish gene kind of thing, where like there's a weird sentience to simply DNA? That we're all suckers, and that there's an actual almost like quasi sentience to life itself that is locked in molecular transference and banging against that candy store window, going like, just invent hard drives, you useless fucks,
Kind of
you
a Graham
fucking dumb
Hancock.
monkeys. Like it's just like it started as colliding molecules in the vacuum of space, and it was like, yes, replicate. Now you know how to do that. Now land on a planet where the replication can equal, like with primordial seek, and like it's all just been this dance of like, give me something. I don't care if it's a honeybee, a giraffe, or these stupid chimps. Give me which animal is going to take information storage and retrieval to a point where I have to stop dicking around with carbon-based life. I am information. I am the only living thing. That's kind of where I stand. That's what I think the big conspiracy is.
Wow.
Holy shit.
Is that we are patsies in the grandest scheme possible of simply life itself, God, information. Well, yeah, I shouldn't say life itself, because life, I think it's an intermediary.
And that's fascinating, because this is something that Matt, Noel, and I have talked about at various stages over the course of this show, on and off the air for years. And it's something that you originally brought to us, Matt, God, all these years ago.
Panspermia?
Simulation theory.
Oh, yes.
And that I think is related.
But you can plug your nightclub.
You
Come
worked
on
really
down
hard
to
on it.
Panspermia.
Recommended by Stefan, as played by Bill Hader, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But the idea then that what's interesting is that's a macrocosmic analog to I think, therefore I am, right? There's some Descartes in there, and there's the idea then that there is it's somewhat comforting, you know? I can see the appeal of the concept that there would be some sort of, maybe not a huge ideology about silly shit you can and cannot do in the moment, but maybe this larger, grander scheme, or beyond that, maybe a simple thought, right?
Yeah.
And that quickly goes, I would say, that quickly leads us into concepts of like the idea of a simulation theory, or like the idea that that even super symmetry, right?
Yeah.
You could go into that.
Yeah, this is something I really wanted to ask you about, just because of some of the themes that you delve into in a lot of your work, and particularly in Rick and Morty, but in other places too, where there are these really heady ideas and concepts about the nature of the universe, about what possibly could exist, whether or not it's just a bunch of parallel universes that exist wrapped around each other in a giant onion, or whatever the Mobius strip looks like. With simulation theory, like, do you know anything about this? Like, I don't want to take you down a path.
I mean, I think as far as a layman can know it, I mean, just the idea. I know, like, Elon's kind of. I guess he kind of popularized it, if that's the right verb. I don't want to offend anybody by going, like, I think he brought it, he got everybody starting talking about it, kind of.
Yeah. There's this guy, Robert Gates, that says he found error-correcting codes in the lowest possible levels of superstring theory, where it appears that the very stuff that the universe is made out of may be written in computer code. This is at least this one guy, brilliant physicist, but he has discussed this on stage with Neil deGrasse Tyson, somebody that we like respect, you know, in a field like astrophysics. But and it sounds silly, but that concept that perhaps this entire thing is a simulation run on a quantum computer that's, you know, the size of the universe, or you know, 10x whatever the universe is, and this is just one.
So wait, are we just like brains in jars? Like, is this like Matrix territory? Like what's...
I think what we've come to think about, I think brains in jars is an incredibly flattering like scenario.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Where like, oh, oy vey, we wish. Like that would mean that the simulation was made for us, even to suck our BTUs out of our body by previously solar powered robots. But like the simulation theory has it that it's just sort of like it's a little more bleak, but also a little more Hindu, which says like the fact that we're now thinking about the possibility of what if you could simulate a universe kind of goes hand in hand with the distinct possibility, like this sort of the inevitability of us one day technologically being able to simulate a universe, plus our obsession with wanting to do it, kind of equals in an almost mathematically inarguable way the distinct possibility that we could be in a simulation, because how the hell would we know? And then from there, the mind kind of just goes berserk, because you say, is that why you can't get, past 0.000 whatever seconds after the Big Bang? You know, you can't reduce subatomic particles to anything that makes sense. Like we're never going to solve for the universe as an actual physical thing.
It's just like some philosophy 101, but it makes me think of the Plato allegory of the cave, where we're all like chained up in a cave and we can't turn our heads and we can only see the wall where shadows are projected, and the fire is behind us and the puppeteers are like making the shadows, and that's That's sort of like a rudimentary version of simulation theory, kind of. I always thought it was sort of appropriate.
That's a fantastic comparison, because in the allegory of the cave, when people leave the cave and go outside, they hate it. They think it's terrible because they have learned unflattering things about themselves, or they have not encountered something that kind of yes-anded them, and this also like calls into mind Gnosticism, this concept that there is some sort of hidden thing, right? There is some sort of greater reality. Why are there certain boundaries? Why can we, after thousands of years of, I would say, doing a B+ job of trying, why can we not answer fundamental existential questions? Where's the nature of consciousness? To this software hardware idea, are we sitting here as more or less physical analogs, just hardware for some kind of software interacting in some sort of network that we can't prove because we're using the wrong tools? Like, how do we prove the idea of a reality of a universe when we have, first off, not a good understanding of what a boundary of a universe is? We can go back a certain amount. We can go forward kind of a little bit, and we're looking through glasses, telescopes. I think the big question there is what, you mentioned the search, Dan. You mentioned the idea that we know eventually, inevitably, we will be able to simulate a universe, right? And we know that
if we make it.
Right, if we make it, it's always that asterisk, always that caveat. You know what I mean? Your personal experience may differ. One thing I don't want to lose, though, is with this concept, with this idea that there may be something greater, that we may be simply, as you said, well, fingers on a hand, or like suckers on a tentacle or something. Like, if that is true, then does that mean, going back to your original question, Matt, does that mean that there is a possibility of a multiverse? Like, is it possible that somewhere in some other facet of whatever the thing may be, is it possible that everyone listening is doing something different? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Is there a universe to the left of ours?
It's just the iteration, you just run the sequence as many times as you want to. If you think about it, if it truly was a program of that sort, it would be powerful enough to where you could just run. There's
usually the point of a simulation. The most useful point of a simulation is to drill down on something that otherwise takes too long.
Yeah.
Through happenstance, but to just scan in a brute force way. That's kind of like the bleakest part of simulation theory to me, is that when you start to think why and who, for whose benefit and what benefit would that be, and I like only work with what I currently know I don't know, and then go, okay, so the reason I would simulate a universe, I guess, would be, let's say time travel turns out to be absolutely impossible no matter what. You can't, no matter how smart you get, no matter how much intelligence you accrue, you can never go back. You can never, but what you can do is theorize about how the universe was created. And based on that theory, you create a universe, a simulated one. And then everything that we're talking about right now, all of our lives, our birth certificates, our loss of our virginity, our favorite Bruce Springsteen song, all of it is meaningless.
Were you here earlier?
all of it means nothing. You mean when you lost your virginity at panspermia? On Springsteen night.
But yeah, it was a great band.
I know, and it was a great time. And I was there. The password was Fidelio.
It always is. Yeah.
The answer may be that there's functionally infinite simulations, either one after the other. That might make us more comfortable, but the reality is probably just all fanned out.
Yeah.
And that the point of all of the simulations is let's call it a computer, but what is it? It's what we become one day. And by we, I mean whatever the hell we become.
The thing that might not be able to go back in time.
The thing that this tongue that split into a trillion taste buds so that it could try to taste itself unsuccessfully, and that it finally, like, all those taste buds reunited into one big numb tongue that was like, I know everything. I'm not racist anymore. There's no point to anything. And then it was like, but what is the one thing I have left? God damn it, it's the same fucking thing we were talking about when we were doing all those podcasts when we thought we were multiple people. Where did I come from and why am I here? And then it's like, okay, that's it. Before I put the cosmic gun in my mouth, which I may not be able to do, that's the other thing I might not be able to do is die.
Because the gun is also me.
Yeah, right. I'm going to launch with all of my resources, which are infinite, an infinite number of simulations, because all I can do is try to hit the version of a universe, a simulated universe that might prove my theory of how a universe could exist without being simulated. And way before that ever happened, that poor fucker, call him Thor, whoever this guy is, like, or lady, thank you, ladies. That thing has definitely had to come to the conclusion that it's probably simulated to begin with. And so it just where do you think it got the idea? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're Amish compared to the people that are actually going to start booting up genuine simulations of a universe within our simulation. So we're already talking about it. We haven't gotten past a Tesla yet, and we're already like so snobby about universes and reality. So like 100 years from now, people are going to be like, all right, like I get it. I'm a simulation. That's going to be a de facto thing. And those are our grandchildren who are going to go, when they greet each other, they're going to go, none of this is real. There is no spoon. And they're going to make love with their Barbarella fingertip pills. And
3 seashells, maybe. Yeah.
But I kind of got lost in that. But it's like, I guess that's the bleak part is the possibility that there is no purpose to the simulation, that you are simply a fleck of spaghetti being thrown at a wall, that your overwhelming likely purpose is a negative result, that is simply to affirm that there's nothing to see here, so that it can make up a larger picture of like where there might be something to see. However, I want before we slash our wrists and
this is a real down note, man.
I do want to say though that can easily be flipped into an incredibly uplifting thing, because what matters in our lives but the time that we're alive, no matter what, if it's a simulation or not, and what is more liberating to a species than if we were to actually realize, if we could convince humanity and go, guys, we were chimpanzees. We were tapped by the Odessa, the Hydra of fucking like cosmic plans. This thing has one goal for us, which is to make ourselves obsolete. Like, we are getting so close as of the petabyte of like putting ourselves out of a job. Can we please realize that if we go by chimpanzee standards, we have nailed it. We're Richie Rich. And if we stop right now and just hit the floor and fuck and like eat nuts and berries and groom ourselves and disco dance, like we'd be cheating the system. Like we could do it. We could just stop. We could just go, this compulsion within our genes, we have one chance, because it had to give us just enough free will, or whatever you call that, to like, because to make it so important to us to do all this shit, that and we could possibly abuse that. We could hack it and we could go, nope, I'm the Hawkeye Pierce of this MASH. I choose to drink martinis in my tent and make jokes about the Korean War. And I choose to make the Korean War last 11 years in syndication. I choose to bend all rules. Like, you fucked up. You trust a chimpanzee. You get what you pay for. Like, we can talk. We can podcast. We can party. We're calling that the top of the line. And, like, we're just going to chill now.
Dude,
the club is called Panspermia. The password is Fidelio.
I'm gonna nerd out for just a minute. One thing I really love about Rick and Morty is that, like, there's a place for shit like you just went through in that show where there wouldn't be in any other cartoon type show I could imagine. It's more like the kind of stuff you'd see in like Black Mirror or like dystopian science fiction. And that's the thing that's really important to me about the show is that it's funny, it's heartfelt, but it asks these kinds of questions, and it does it in an intelligent and engaging way. And it makes me think of this conversation about the episode where, like, there's like a tiny universe and like this battery that's powering Rick's spaceship, and then those people make another tiny universe and that tiny universe, and then those people make another tiny universe inside that. And it makes me think of this simulation theory stuff. I was wondering where that idea came from, and like
that's exactly where it came from. I mean, I think we would talk endlessly about that stuff in the writers' room. Wow. So we were just sort of like, that is what we do, right? We're humans. We talked about domestication of dogs last night. Dogs are sort of an expression of our. That's technology that humans learned they could manipulate. That's biotech. Like, we learned that if you make this sheltie fuck this other sheltie and you leave this sheltie that's not behaving the way we want it to, then you change what a sheltie is.
And looking into this, there was a very interesting question regarding this. There was this idea. It was originally posed as, can dogs be racist? That was the original, that was the starting point of that question.
There's a Radio Lab about that, by the way, that I think they delve into that question, and I can't remember what they found.
What was fascinating too with this, there's a lot of neurochemistry at play, and there's also the question of people not being entirely conscious or self-aware, not metacognitive about why they do things. Teaching, there's teaching another creature that will also remember, replicate, and maybe at times instruct that kind of behavior. We have these imperfect teachers who don't really know the curriculum they're teaching, and then we have these maybe not the smartest, but very dedicated students who repeat this behavior. And so it went down into this idea of have human beings, or the earlier mixtapes of human beings and the concurrent ones, have they trained dogs so much that they became did they stare at the leash so long that the leash stared back at them to do?
Yeah, the dogs trained us how to give them all the things they need.
And then this part of the conversation that haunted me just a bit was the idea that could we trace the origin point of that first interaction, that first canid, homo, whatever interaction, and then from that, could we find another breadcrumb or another, line or red string on the board that traces later evolution? And then could we find some sort of inborn thing such that people who came late to the canid game versus people who came early, for lack of a better word, could we find something real about that? And so I looked into the origins, like some of the most recent research on the evolution of domestication of dogs. And there are maybe 3 guesses, and they're very broad. And even the people who are like hardcore about it are like, this is where it happened. I think probably, guys, I don't know. I'm just trying to get funding.
So they're as unsure about the origin of the domestic dog as we are about ourselves, really?
Yeah, the boy and his dog kind of thing. Not the Ellison story, but the boy and his dog sort of convenient myth is just that. It's
we can't pinpoint that to Syria or the Fertile Crescent or.
Nope. There are 3 guesses.
Okay,
but they're all kind of roughly roughly based on where an extinct version of wolf is thought to exist. So there's like, if we see the map, there's East Asia, there's South America. I want to say I'm missing the second one, and then there's a specific region of Europe. But when I say specific, I just mean like in broad, north of this part or east of this part. They don't have there's not a dig site where anyone found like the first Homo sapien or Homo Neanderthalis or something, and then the first dog hanging out.
Yeah.
So we really don't know, which means I hate to agree. I hate to agree with this kind of inability to pinpoint a beginning and ending to what we call reality, but that means that that means that we have been outpaced by the technology we created since the very beginning.
Right.
Right?
Because we don't know. This is my kind of. It sounds like a joke, but I just think it's because I just asked the question on my podcast. How do we know the extent to which dogs have shaped our evolution?
Yeah.
If we all agree that since the beginning, which we can't pinpoint, that we make these broad estimates, 100,000 years, 50,000 years, that dogs have been by our sides. How do we know the extent to which the ability to read a dog's face, to be comfortable around a dog, to be able to sense when a dog is or isn't going to growl or share, or how do we know that those things didn't become survival traits that lent to our own natural selection within our own species? I mean, for God's sakes, to what extent does the ability to work with a Camaro affect the gene pool of a trailer park from 1960 to 1990? Now it's like, don't at me. I don't know when the Camaro was invented. But it's like you imagine, for God's sakes, the ability to run a dog as the code that it is. Of course, before the television remote control existed, before chimneys needed to be swept, when dogs were the height of technology.
Yeah.
People that weren't dog people could possibly have been they're gone now. They're in some parallel universe where we didn't domesticate dogs, and those people are in charge.
It's just hyenas, right?
Well, yeah.
Just monkeys.
It is really odd to imagine how dire that technology was when you were dealing with a wolf, and those little things you're talking about, the micro movements on your face and your ability to really sense whether or not this animal is going to attack or not. That is, those minute things are so vital throughout the learning of that.
Well, because there's a chain reaction that takes place. When I was a kid, I was always told dogs can smell fear and all those kinds of things, and you'd have reactions with neighborhood dogs. As I grew up in the Midwest, and there weren't leash laws and all these things. You just run across a random dog, and maybe that random dog stops and takes you in and is and I don't know how much of it is superstition and pop science, but I had been told as a kid don't be afraid. Dogs can smell fear, and so and that of course causes what reaction in you when you run into a strange dog?
Pink elephants, right?
Yeah. And then it happens, and then all of a sudden the dog is growling and barking at you viciously, and you're like, I fucked up. Oh man, it smelled my fear. That's the level of interaction we were having with dogs from the beginning. And I mean, you guys probably know. This just blows my mind. That idea that they put a laser kind of tracker on a dog's head at one point, and they definitively know now that dogs they look at one side of the human face. Mm-hmm. The fact that they look at our face is insane.
They know which part.
The fact that they know what pointing is. That they look at our face. Why don't they think that we are our hands? Those are the things that have food. The answer is because the ones that weren't reading human faces are gone. Dead men tell no tales. They didn't reproduce. And the ones that could pick up on the human face, and those ones all look at one side of it. Why? Because it's slightly more expressive by like a couple of nanomicrons of musculature. We have one side of our face that tells a little bit more, whether we're pissed, disappointed, or how about racist? Like, that's why I think Occam's razor explanation is no, dogs probably. Why would being racist help them survive? What helps them survive way more easily is being able to read their owner. And if their owner is crossing the street every time it's like they're probably just great amplifiers of our internal, like, unrecognized anxiety about xeno people.
Well,
sorry. I love the way we were talking about the idea of dogs as technology. Like, it makes perfect sense, but I never really thought of it quite like that. And one point you made last night was like, we were talking about the book Sapiens and how, when Neanderthals figured out how to use tools, that was an advantage, but they never really progressed past that. And then, Homo sapiens could use tools, but could also like organize better, and they would like win in a fight every time.
I think it was like Neanderthal. I can't remember if Neanderthals had tools. They were like Homo erectus.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
They were like tool specialists.
The point is, though, the idea that it was an adaptation for us to figure out how to work with dogs, and it affected our evolution in the same way that like it affected their evolution.
Well, it affected as probably an extension of what that guy's big kind of thesis is that the one thing that we're really good at that rains down through everything else is we're good at believing in bullshit.
Harari.
We're good at gossip. We're good at ideology. It translated into our ability to say things like, hey, you want to go kick some Neanderthal ass tomorrow? Why? Who told you that's a good idea? You haven't heard of him? His name's Steve. And meanwhile, in the Neanderthal camp, they're like, hey, have you seen these like Homo sapiens like walking around? I think they're dicks. Like, who told you that? Steve. I don't know, Steve. Shut up and get back to Neanderthaling. And they maxed out at functionality of like 100 Neanderthals. Meanwhile, there's 20,000 Homo sapiens over the hill tweeting up a storm, and it's snowballing. And that's how our capacity to invent language and flags and ideologies, like, we take things that aren't real more seriously than things right in front of our goddamn face.
Language is technology. And especially that dichotomy between what is real, what is more real, what is the priority. So
I'll tell you what's more real.
What's that, Matt?
Universes created by Bethesda and other video game companies. Because I hear you talking about Fallout all the time and some of these other games, and I know we're all like some Skyrim. Give me an open world where I can exist to take my mind off of this one for a little while and, have enough agency to where I can feel as though I'm doing something.
Get the rewards.
Do you guys, sorry, I don't want to derail too much, but do you guys feel like I'm just trying to apply that kind of, maybe it's just the impulse that we have of wanting to escape. And, a lot of the things humans do is to escape having to deal with whatever we're having to deal with. And am I just going way too off the rails here? I don't even know what I'm trying to talk about.
There are no rails. This is the rail.
What rails would you go off of?
Conversation.
I was trying to bring it back to a lot of what we're talking about here, like entertaining ourselves, but we got so good at organizing and doing all these things that we've created these alternate
fake
universes
reason to care about a thing.
I don't know. Would one say a simulation of sorts?
I guess so, but in this version, you can build things like in Minecraft or something like that, where you can just endlessly create something while completely ignoring all that's in front of your face. That's what I was,
and completely ignoring the consequences, because there's no consequences in the game, even if you like play, morally or whatever. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no real consequences to what you do.
But on the flip side of that, maybe also the utter stability of consequence, like as in if you play an open world sandbox game, what's the one thing that really pisses you off? Some bug or bad game design that involves you coming back into the game and some shit that you put some energy into and won by experience and hardship and practiced at is somehow undone.
Yeah.
That is like we get so angry because what are we getting from a video game that we're not getting from real life? It's just consistency. Minecraft, best example ever. But also knitting. I mean, that's because and dog domestication. It's like I did this thing. It's goddamn there. It's not going anywhere. Like we draw such we are addicted to that because we are, after all, pattern recognizers. Like that is our double down bet. We are chimpanzees gone haywire with this obsession of finding and predicting patterns, and then we get this rush when we successfully say, well, according to everything that I've put all this energy into, if I plug this wire into this thing, this is going to come up. It's going to be a red light. And when it happens, we go, holy shit. And we barely take any time to celebrate because celebration doesn't spike our dopamine quite as much as going on to the next thing. We go our celebration takes the form of do you realize what this means I can do? This means I can make 3 colors of lights if I get 3 wires. And then we move on to the next thing that arguably is going to frustrate the hell out of us because we're going to find out at a certain point, we fucked something up. I was wrong about that. Why is it now that there's 3 wires, it's fucking up? And we act like we hate that, and yet what are we doing? We're chasing that dopamine spike of when we get the positive result. We just don't want that positive result taken away from us. And that's what I think. That's what video games provide. It is this fantasy that we were promised by God in real life. Hey, if you guys find an apple and it's the right color, you bite into it, it's not going to kill you. And time again, life lies. Yeah. You bite into it. There's a worm. And it's like, hey, man, you're not the only thing on Earth. There's a worm. You wanted an apple too? Whatever, boy. and you're well, tell me, okay, I'll incorporate that. I'll invent a worm detector. But it's we expect results, And then God says, I don't know, man. You ever hear of a hurricane? Whatever, bro. So long. You thought you understood the economy. You got a nice penthouse in New Orleans. Whatever, bro. And we're you can't keep changing them rules. Minecraft don't do that.
I'm going to build a thing that always has the same rules, right? Yeah. So off mic, we looked around and realized that we've been talking for some time, at least the way we're measuring time in this reality or this interpretation thereof. And Dan, we've been sort of waxing, we've been philosophizing, and oddly enough, other than 2 or 3 things, we haven't bridged any sort of specific conspiracy.
It's so unlike me to create a non-action in the environment. I can't believe we didn't get the most work you've ever gotten done during my tenure here.
Oh no! Now I think we have probably, just to be completely transparent, we probably have 10, 12 episodes that we have to go back now and do. We have to do an hour on the stuff that we touched on.
Well, I think we all agree this is going to be a freewheeling thing, and we don't always get to do that. But it's really fun just to let it rip, And that's been happening.
I just hope me combined with John Hodgman doesn't create a revolt among. But I would assume you guys probably have some pretty intelligent, pretty non-star fucky fans that are I don't care, don't.
Well, I mean, dude, that John Hodgman bit was supposed to be in the intro. It was just going to be a fun little thing to plug his book, and then it just kept going and ended up being a great episode. And that's why we wouldn't have put it out if it hadn't have been an interesting perspective on something that we talk about all the time, which is secret societies. And he had this insight information that kind of helped us demystify secret societies a little bit, and we just let it roll because it was great. And we had a good time, and listeners, I think, dig it.
And he never told us who that person was.
Right, that guy. That was really my first question when I pulled up to these guys and they were helping me park. I was like, "Did Hodgman tell you who this rich douchebag is that has these parties at Masonic lodges?" and they don't know.
Well, that was the one that he wished to be reinvited to.
Right.
He spilled the beans on Book and Snake, I think. But then there was like the nondescript Illuminati-esque gathering that he would not divulge.
Which, just because I find it interesting, and I think it actually is interesting to your listeners, like that is a question that came up when you guys were on my podcast, was this idea of you guys saying people are bad at keeping secrets, which sort of undercuts the feasibility of some of these more extreme kind of moon landing scale conspiracies. However, when you unpack certain small scale things, like for instance, the fact that John Hodgman got invited to this super swanky, surrounded by rich, famous people, all of whom were told, keep this a secret, because that's how we like to do it. And his sentiment about it was, I described it in my book, I'm describing it here, but I'm not telling you who it was because I want to be invited back. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be a profound portrayal of like the other side of that theory, which is that 9/11 couldn't be an inside job because look at the doofuses that were in power when it happened. How could they possibly have pulled off the suppression of 9/11 when they couldn't even defend us against 9/11? They couldn't even. It's like we get kind of addicted to that feeling sometimes. But then again, it's like there are other kinds of conspiracies that are like it's easier to keep a secret sometimes.
Yeah, we went back and forth on that last night, where it's the idea of like mass, even with the Sapiens stuff, the idea that we figured out how to cooperate through stories. Like mass scale cooperation is sort of our bread and butter as a species. But we talked about the idea like how could these warring factions, cooperate and then keep a secret, for that long.
Oh, you're not talking about the end of Sapiens. You're talking about how it applied to.
Right.
Okay.
No,
yeah.
and then it came up last night where the idea was there are absolute examples of that kind of cooperation when you can point to that benefit.
Right.
Whether it's continuing to enrich your bougie, Illuminati woods gathering pals, or whether it's two countries that have something to gain.
One of the most effective benefits, however, at least my impression from our conversation there, was the avoidance of consequence, right?
If the script is watermarked, and you get a copy of Ant-Man 3 and you're like, it's like, look, Marvel really wants you to take a look at this. Like I'm making up this example, I swear to God. Sure. But it's like you don't want to be uncool. Like it's the fear of consequence. If you guys after we hit stop, you go, okay, this is a thing we do with all our guests. Get out the pipe. We're going to smoke this like 3-inch larva from the Amazon. It's going to make you see the dwarves that construct time. But then don't tell anybody that we did this, okay? I'm eventually going to tell Duncan Trussell. I'm going to tell a lot of people. But if it's tied to, like, if that smoking that worm gives me an orgasm beyond which I've never had, and then you tell me at the end of it, like, we do it once a week, and you're now you now have a tracker in your body because of the worm. Like the worm actually sends out a signal if you tell anybody about it, and then you simply will deny it, and you won't ever get to do it again.
And if someone else who is also has one of these trackers violates that, then you are, as part and parcel,
duty bound
to
tell us. There's that too.
Suppress that.
And I think that holds fast. That confounds the idea of humans can't keep a secret.
Yeah.
Humans can't keep a secret because usually, by and large, betraying a secret has a lot more dopamine spike to offer than keeping it. But like the example I used downstairs is like, even if it's just simple, like if United Airlines had a program that was like, for whatever reason, like free first class forever for the rest of your life, all you have to do is just never tell anybody about it. Well, okay, fine. I get no profit from telling people I'm flying first class. They'll just yell at me anyway if I tweet it. So of course I'm not going to tell anybody. It's like, why would I?
But I I still not 100% on board. I think it is steadfast, like it's a watertight point, but it doesn't. I think we have to consider time, because the function over time also challenges that. Like when we have things that are secret, people will die for, people will kill for, people will benefit from perpetuating. Right?
Time will eventually turn my United legroom program. I'll get diabetes and lose both my legs. I won't be able to fly anymore because of a stent in my heart. And at that point, there will be more reward in telling people everything I know about United's secret flyer program.
Hence, deathbed confession tropes, right? But or cliches even. But the next, I think the next step of that that we've talked about. Pretty in depth, actually, and I hope we didn't ruin your show doing it. But we talked about the idea of keeping something secret in some sort of like sacrosanct, never talk about this box, versus rendering the secret somehow less valuable or irrelevant. So for the legroom conspiracy, for the first class for free conspiracy, then the idea becomes, what if, spitballing, what if now there's teleportation? And, what if we've broken our lives to fight for the honor of the worm and the airline and the first class, and now the people who brought us into this are all about teleportation. They think it's like hipster and quaint that you physically fly on an aircraft, and they think it's your thing. But now you want to teleport. Now no matter what you say about that specific instance of what was a life and death secret, no one will care, especially if they're inundated with information, right? Because now, again, we are unequipped to deal with, what's the Dunbar's number argument? We can only know, how many people is it?
I don't know exactly. It's in the low hundreds.
I was going to say like 3.
So you're saying, I think to your point, you're saying like to take JFK, for example, then for reasons both individual to humans and to it would collectively, the conspiracy, the size of which would be required to assassinate Kennedy and keep it all a secret, the number of people that would have to have known, not only would they end up dying, moving into political phases where it was more profitable to tell the truth, but also just in general, they would have bigger secrets. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. There would be a going back to the idea of consistency of consequence, which is not a real thing in the real world, right? We can write laws, we can make video games implying a situation in which that would exist. But yeah, I think just as technology evolves at a very quick pace, as humanity or organic things continue to evolve, we see this situation where on an individual and a societal level, the concept of value of information evolves.
Well, it's even like the UFO thing. We talked about the flippy, inside the cockpit videos of like these unidentified objects. Mm-hmm. And yeah, now the Navy's like, yeah, that's what it is. We don't really care anymore. It's not worth it to us to like do the dance
really
anymore.
True.
We get bigger fish to fry. We have 800 of our best pilots were trans, and now we have to replace them.
Right.
Like we're treading water.
I'm just saying the rules change. Like the times change, the rules change. It's like, yeah, of course there were UFOs the whole time, idiots.
I love that.
I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. Like the goalpost moves, and the consequences change. Therefore, people can wantonly come out and be like, yeah, of course you were doing that the whole time. Like, you didn't know.
So secrecy exists in a given scenario so long as that secrecy is somehow seen as beneficial. And there must be a tipping point where it's rendered irrelevant or where it is, I don't know, that's slippery though, because that's very, very close to saying that there is no such thing over time as a secret. That's very optimistic, I think.
Well,
you
describe it. So now take the Illuminati.
Sure.
It's simultaneously completely discredited by some of this stuff, but then it's the exception that proves the rule, because you go, if there's a society, if you guys smoke that worm with me afterwards, and then you keep adding more worms, that's what the Illuminati is. It's the teleportation principle. They say the more time changes, they say it's not going to stop changing. And we've been doing this for 600 years, so we've got lots of stories to tell you about people who have come before you that succumbed to the temptation to write a tell-all or to cash in their chips, and that person's name was Dave Chappelle, and now look what happened to him, or whatever. Like, they'll give you like examples. They'll go, this person's in their underwear in the street. Like now they're officially classified as a crazy person, and like their children aren't going to go to the right schools, or even if they do, their grandchildren will be broke. Or if they, depending on what they reveal to you, and then they go. On the other hand, you have a subscription to a cheat code library where everyone's going to keep playing Mario Brothers. You alone are always going to have access to the hidden levels. You're always going to be able to. It might even include being able to benefit your friends who aren't in the Illuminati. You might be able to pick and choose like the circumstances that might be like a personal benefit of it, and it's like all they ask you to do is eat a baby every October, or
right, yeah.
But it's like I kind of ask myself if like I don't think I have anything innately inside of me that would necessarily, when it gets that extreme. I wonder if I have the marrow in my bones that would simply go, nah, it's the right thing to do. I'm going to bring this whole thing down.
Yeah.
Especially if the overwhelming indication was, you can't do that. You think you're the first guy to think that?
And it won't matter if you do, right?
Right. You'll just turn into you'll be called a drug addict and a schizophrenic.
Is it a baby per person, or is it a baby per like organization?
Oh, is it like a baby for the table?
That's going to determine my
that's your stance
where I fall on this line.
That really is genuinely
it's accurate.
Yeah, it feels accurate, and it's scary to me because I've never actually thought about it in that particular way.
Well, when Hodgman was talking about the secret societies, even though he was doing it with a willful and knowledge like kind of perspective, he's like, yeah, all they really do is sit around and read books or jerk off and like hide in coffins and play Dracula. Like right. It doesn't change the fact that when I think about the existence of something like the Skull and Bone Society, I gotta be brutally honest and say, like, one of the primary reactions I have is jealousy. Like I am the guy that like the airline offers like platinum VIP, whatever. It's anytime there's like a, airline lounge, it's like, and they have an extra platinum door and you can't get past that one unless you have the other thing. And I'm like, I'm always just like filled with this, like just
this envy, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm like, come on, man, get me everywhere. I want the whole thing. Like I want, and you really could fool me easily. When the Viper Room was still open here in LA, the Viper Room had 2 booths, and it was just they were booths that were smaller than something you could get at a Shoney's, but they were the only place to sit, and they were VIP booths, and it was just like I was just such a sucker for it. I was like, I'm not going to the Viper Room unless I know a VIP, so I can sit in one of those booths. It's like it's garbage. Like I could be sold a closet to stand in if you called it a VIP closet. Anyway, so I'm just saying, like, if the Bilderberg contacted me, if the Masons had turned out to be real, I'd be like, come on, yeah, make me a member.
Most, I agree with you. I think most people would, because there's this dichotomy between, and this is maybe not the best example, but it's like we see so many paintings that we've made of ourselves, right? So many, like the Norman Rockwell thing, so many self-portraits we've made, whether it's our Netflix queue full of a ton of documentaries that we like to think we're the person who would watch that. You know what I mean? Like people are scrolling through and we're like, yeah, man, I give so many shits about North Korea. What's happening there is terrible. And then, like, look at what you recently watched. One of those is the story we tell about ourselves, and the other one is who we are defined by our actions. And it is a very difficult, I would say preposterous assumption to make that any significant majority, or forget that, any significant minority of human beings would, given that sort of choice, say, nah, I got my thing. You know what I mean?
I got this code about if 7,500,000,000 people all are immersed in one reality, and you beckon me back into the back room of the Vatican, and you tell me we've been doing this for 1,000 years. Here's a Salisbury steak. Here's a goblet of wine. This is Bill Gates. This is Tom Hanks.
Eat this baby.
Take a bite of this baby. I mean, that is the deal breakers would get down to those minutia. It would be like, bite this baby. Am I killing the baby?
Or am I just like breaking the skin? Or
are they revealing that there was baby in the baby back rib that I already ate with Tom Hanks? And is Tom Hanks like, I'm on my third one, like, just relax. But really taking that away from it, it's just sort of like, it's funny how, like, offended I'll get about the idea of, like, autocracy versus democracy. Like, the bullet that I believe I would take in the reality of, like, how I truly actually do believe that if push came to shove, the torture I'd endure and the sacrifice I'd be willing to commit to protect my fellow human beings' freedoms actually is pretty extreme by my own measure. Like, I look at myself and I go, you're a little bit of a fucking, when it comes down to it, like, you'd almost cut off your nose to spite your face just to make a point about how important it is to not let that vampire into that kitchen. But that's when it's on that small scale. And but when I think about the Harry Potter version of it, where people are just like, no, it's magic. Like, it's we have a secret entrance in a subway, and like
we will teach you magic.
Everyone that thinks they're eating calamari is eating pig anus, and only we know. And like when it gets that fun, I think I'd keep secrets.
Yeah,
I'd start to go, well, geez, I mean, this is like a Joss Whedon show, Like I'd be like, well, now I'm a hero for taking part in this. Or I'm like Jennifer Garner in Alias. It's like, oh, you're part of the CIA. You're part of this. Sure, I'll do wet work.
But how much of that is framed such that participating in this is the one way to matter? Because that means not participating in it if one would assume that immediately, no matter what you do, right, in opposition to this, if you blow it up and you say you go public and you're like, this is how you get first class on this air flight, this is what happens to all those babies, and here's a thigh bone of a child or whatever. It didn't mean for my voice to sound that arch, but you
or that excited,
or that
thigh bone of a child.
Well, that's the primo part, because it's like,
Ben,
just think about it. Okay, so it's
You've
for
really
the
crossed
table.
over. This
Like
is Rex
6 to
here,
8,
dude.
six to 8 people.
Okay.
Well, you guys, whatever.
Drink the Kool-Aid. The new phrase should be "taste the baby."
Oh, boy.
I'm sorry, that's gross. We're never going to take that out. No, we talked about luxury.
Finish your
Yeah.
thought.
So the thought then is the alternative. If such a situation like that exists, the alternative then is complete non-entity status.
So it makes me think of Tommy Lee Jones leaving Will Smith on the park bench in the first act of Men in Black. Like, what a brilliantly crafted. It's like, instead of sweating away over what could have easily been a 200-page screenplay, joylessly adapting this thing, it was like they took such a simple approach, which was Will Smith found himself accidentally finding out as a New York cop that, some people have 4 arms, and what's his face? I forgot his name already. Tommy Lee, like, sits him down and says, here's the deal. There's a bigger world out there, and you got a choice. And I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk away. And you can forget about all this. And I don't know if he explicitly says, like, if you do, like I'll actually literally make you forget, but it's
Doesn't
actually
he like give him a day or a time
yeah,
period?
it's like
think it over.
Yeah. But it's like in that moment, I remember reading that script because I was new out here, and then I saw it on the screen, and I had the same response. I was like, God, this is just such a simple, brilliant way of like ushering an audience across a threshold.
It's the red pill, blue pill thing.
Simple,
Like,
yeah.
that's
another great example.
It's the same, yeah, for sure.
It's like you don't always need to have a refusal of the call in these stories because there actually are just absolutely there's thresholds that you just don't have a choice but to cross. And it's like, do you really want to go back to working in your laundromat now that we have like touched your life and made it more magical?
I feel like you really called us out because at the beginning of every episode, there's that you can turn back now part.
Right.
So,
and you guys, I appreciate you guys foleying a doorbell sound. I kind of was going to ask you about that.
That's mad.
I'm so sorry.
Ask us about
Is
that.
that
I'm
the
so
dark
sorry.
forces ringing your doorbell? You can turn back now from your own door?
I can't believe that's so funny.
Wait, is that the big question you
what's
were
that?
talking
So
about
funny.
off air?
What's
no,
extra
no,
funny
no.
about that though is like we stripped that out of the video, and in the video there's a door, like there's
Yeah.
a visual of like
It's
a
a
shadowy
narrative.
figure
It's-
standing
It's
at the
very
door.
Twilight Zone. That's what
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, there's like the door in Twilight Zone. You
Yeah,
can turn
yeah,
back
yeah.
now. Bing bong.
And Matt created that from back when we started out as a YouTube show, and we were thinking like we need an intro. It needs to be
Needs to be
fast.
sexy. It
Yeah,
needs to be
sexy.
immersive.
Right.
Have you
know?
actually seen it ever?
No, I've never seen it.
All right, well, one day we'll watch
I
it.
do have one more
I'd love to
question
get your
about the
idea.
opening. The drum beat. It's a little off.
Yeah, that's my fault. Again, when I was a young man,
Did you?
the style
Is that
now,
an
man. It's
SK1
like-
and you were
it's
kind of
like-
like doing it by finger?
I know.
You
Yeah.
did it in Fruity Loops, didn't you?
I did it with my hands on a keyboard.
you didn't quantize it. You
redid
just
it.
kept the performance.
I redid it 3 times. I didn't quantize it, and because I
I
didn't
like
know what
it.
I was doing. I'm
Have you ever
sorry,
listened?
guys.
No, dude, no.
It's discordant.
Have
There's
you
that
heard
part.
the
It's off.
artist Flying Lotus? Like it's like
Yeah.
he's like an awesome producer. He does that all the time. Like very like unquantized skittery beats. I've always
Well, it's
liked
kind of
it.
hip hop does that now
That's
too.
what I'm
saying.
Flying
They
Lotus is kind of like-
deliberately
yeah.
rob you of your expectation.
Jay Dilla or whatever, like that. Even like exactly, like the MPC, all playing the pads.
All of whom cite Matt Frederick
is
as an
basically the
influence.
Jay
I'm so
Dilla
glad I got
of-
that question
yeah.
because every time I'm like, here it comes. Like at this moment, I'm like,
I am mortified right now.
it's so
We've all thought
endearing.
it. We've all thought it.
Oh my god, I
love it.
fucking love it.
But it's
'Cause-
also unsettling to a degree.
yes.
And that's, I
Imagine
think,
if
why
the
it
dark
works.
forces not only rang your doorbell,
Played your drum machine.
but like also just were like never quantized.
Exactly. Well, the Dark Forces don't quantize.
Well,
that's
They march to a beat of their own drum machine.
listen. I'm calling a stop to this episode right now.
Wow.
Listen.
All right, I only wanted to ask about Promise.
Oh,
That was my conspiracy theory.
like the Inslaw software stuff.
Yeah. That's it. That was my thing that when I mentioned,
That's
I was
the
like,
thing.
I have a pet conspiracy theory or whatever that I wanted to ask you guys about. But we can talk about it. Let's go somewhere and have a drink.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
The audience is like, oh, thanks.
Well,
Thanks for talking about dog domestication. Go have fun talking about conspiracy theories in a bar.
All right, listen.
Don't.
All right. Well,
I'm just tickled by this. I'm so sorry. I just almost kicked the table over you.
so that sounds like a fantastic idea because we need to. First off, I need to learn a little bit more about Promise, and I would prefer you guys know me. I'm not super great off the cuff, so
It's
I
the
need to-
prosecutors.
Is it an acronym?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Everything's
I love
an
I love
acronym, dude.
acronyms. Sorry, man.
Everything's
I
a-
spilled Diet Coke all over Ben's computer.
Oh, wow. So we're burning down the show to save the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Dan, thank you so much for hanging out. Now, as you established earlier in our episode today, you have departed Twitter, right? But you are still active, despite our various concerns about surveillance states, on the social medias, particularly Instagram. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's like my one outlet.
You've created like your own surveillance state in your house.
I have like a 16 camera cardiovascular workout program
with
that
green
I do.
screen.
Yeah, and about 40 people at a time watch it. And there's like regulars that have formed a community around watching me lift weights and swim.
Do you see the feedback? Do you respond ever? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's people that are become part of. It's like a family, and I made a title sequence for the workout, and I include like some of the people that only comment. Like as if they're cast members. Like,
Is that the guy at the table on his computer? Is that a separate thing, or is that just something you made once or twice?
that was stock footage that I used to like. That's a pre-roll kind of thing.
I love that.
As I'm setting up the feed, then I bring that guy up, and that's a loop of him sitting there typing. And then at any point, I can then I hit the button that goes into the 60-second. It's about to start kind of thing.
Well, where can people see this for themselves? 'Cause
Instagram.
They want
Dan
proof.
Harmon.
Dan Harmon. I have to say too, like my daughter isn't quite old enough to watch Rick and Morty, but I am a big fan of your car songs, where you've got the earbuds in, and you've obviously made this track, and you're lip syncing in your car. And there's even one where you're like taking a meeting at a studio, and you sort of stop the song for a second, talk to the security guard, and then go back to the song. She loves that, and we watch them together, and it's a bonding thing for us.
My fiance's sister's kids, I trust them to curate because I don't want to think about kids listening to my songs when I do them, but I really love the fact that some of the songs just happen by sheer coincidence to be PG. They're not about anything that involves like thing. I love when kids love your songs. It's like
the one about the pooping robot in particular, kind of a gem. But again, see it for yourself. Those are all like on the feed, but then the stories is where you can see the live streams is where you can see the workout videos. So.
And when does Rick and Morty officially start?
November
something.
I don't know if there's a date yet on that trailer, but just start staring at your television in November.
And while you are on the internet, while you are staring at your screen of choice and thinking about the things, do you have a bone to pick with this conversation? Do you have a personal anecdote that applies? Do you distrust dogs? Let us know. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. We're all over the place. We particularly recommend our favorite part of the internet, our community, our favorite part of Facebook Sandbox Internet. Here's where it gets crazy, our community page where you can meet our favorite part of the show, your fellow listeners. And riddle me this, Matt, what do people do if they hate social media?
Oh, well, they pick up their phone and they dial this weird number that has too many characters, but it really does work. It's 1-833-STDWYTK. Dan, you were gonna do that with us.
I chickened out.
Yeah, you did great.
My mind has been blown.
I knew
so
it was
many times.
STD. That's easy to remember.
WYT. Yeah.
You know, that's odd that you say that. That gets bandied around as an acronym when we're doing setup pre-production stuff. And I've had people who are just friends of mine see a text on my phone or some email alert, and it's like
it's cut off and it just says STD.
Yeah,
you have STD in an hour.
Right. Yeah. It's like STD 15 minutes.
Well, hey guys, what if you don't want to do any of that stuff? What if the internet terrifies you? You can do the old way of using the internet that is a little more indirect, and you can send us a good old-fashioned email. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.